If someone handed me £10,000 today and said, Matty, build me a crypto portfolio from scratch, this is exactly how I do it. And before we go any further, I want to be really clear about what this video is and what it isn't, because this matters. This isn't a hype video. This isn't a prediction video. This isn't me calling the bottom or promising you insane returns. This is about process. Because in crypto, the people who last, the people who actually benefit when the market finally moves, aren't the ones who guessed right just once. They're the ones that have a process that stops them sabotaging themselves. Most people don't fail in crypto because they're stupid. They fail because they're emotional. They buy without a plan. They sell without a plan. They change their mind every time the market moves against them. And over time, that constant reacting chips away at their confidence, their capital, and eventually their interest in crypto altogether. So what I want to do in this video is slow the whole thing down, strip away the noise, and show you how I would think about building a portfolio if I was starting today in this market we're actually in, not the one that people wish they were in. Not something designed to look clever on social media, not something that only works if everything goes perfectly, but something that's built to survive boredom, drawdowns, chop, fear, and still be standing when the real opportunity finally shows up. This is a longer sit-down video, so if you're actually watching this properly, grab a drink, settle in, because this is about understanding why decisions make sense, not just copying a list of coins. Before we talk about any coins, any altcoins, or any numbers, we need to talk about context. Because portfolios don't exist in a vacuum. A portfolio that works brilliantly in a bull market can absolutely destroy you in a fear market. And a portfolio that protects you in fear can feel painfully slow and frustrating when the market finally turns. This is where most people go wrong. They see somebody doing well, they see screenshots, and they see a list of coins. And instead of asking why that portfolio exists, they just copy it. But what they don't realize is that portfolio was usually built in a completely different phase of the market. People watch videos recorded in euphoria and try to apply that thinking during a fear zone like what we're in right now. Or they watch fear-based content and then wonder why they miss the upside when sentiment flips. And this constant mismatch between strategy and the market phase is what causes frustration. Most people don't lose money because they picked the wrong coin. They lose money because their portfolio wasn't built for the phase of the market they're actually in. And I know that frustrates people because everyone wants one answer, one portfolio, one setup that works forever. But crypto doesn't work like that. Markets move in cycles, liquidity changes, sentiment shifts, and behavior changes. And your portfolio needs to reflect that. Otherwise, you end up constantly fighting the market instead of working with it. Right now, the market is emotional. You've got people who are scared, people who are bored, people who are angry, and people who are desperate for something to happen. And desperation is one of the most expensive emotions you can bring into crypto. So this video isn't about predicting the next move. It's about positioning yourself sensibly so that when the market does move, you're not scrambling to catch up. There's something else that plays a massive role in why people struggle in crypto, and it doesn't get talked about enough. Crypto can be incredibly lonely. Unless your best mate is into crypto, most of the time you're on your own. You're making decisions in your head, second guessing yourself and wondering if you're early, late, or just wrong. And when you're isolated, you don't sanity check ideas. You don't talk things through. You either panic, freeze, or overreact, and none of those lead to good decisions. And that's exactly why we built the Crypto Wolfpack. It's just a place where people can talk through the market together, daily group live streams, real discussion, and no pressure. I will come back to this at the end of the video, but the link is in the description if you want to go and take a look. For now, let's get into the most important part of this entire video. Before I show you a single coin, before we talk about percentages or allocations, we need to talk about rules. Because rules are what stop emotions taking over. Without rules, you're just not investing, you're reacting. And reacting is how most people get chopped up in this market. So in the next section, I'm going to walk you through exact rules I'd follow before building this portfolio. And if you understand this part properly, everything else in the video will make a lot more sense. There's a few things that I see over and over again when people start building a crypto portfolio. And none of them are about intelligence. They're about how humans behave when money, uncertainty, and emotion all collide together. And if you don't understand these things now, you can have the best coins in the world and still mess it up. The first mistake almost everybody makes is size positioning emotionally instead of logically. What people say they're doing is investing. What they're actually doing is placing bets based on how confident they feel in that moment. If they're excited about a coin, they size it bigger. If they're unsure, they size it smaller. And that means their portfolio is being driven by mood and not structure. That's why you'll see people go all in on one idea, then panic when it goes against them. It's not because the idea was bad, it's because the size was wrong. When position size is wrong, even small pullbacks feel unbearable. If your position size forces you to stare at the chart every 5 minutes, it's probably too big. If you can't sleep because of one trade or one coin, it's probably too big. That's not conviction, that's exposure. And exposure without structure is how portfolios implode. The second thing that kills more portfolios than people realize is boredom. Everyone talks about fear and everybody talks about panic, but boredom is far more destructive because boredom pushes people to do something when doing nothing would actually be the correct decision. Most of the time, nothing exciting happens. Price chops. News contradicts itself and sentiment flips backwards and forwards. So they start tinkering. They add coins they don't really believe in. They overtrade. They chase narratives. Not because the portfolio needs it, but because they need stimulation. This is why a good portfolio isn't exciting most of the time. If your portfolio consistently gives you adrenaline, something is probably wrong. Good portfolios feel boring, they feel slow, and they feel uneventful. And that's exactly why they work. Another massive mistake people make is copying somebody else's portfolio and assuming that's the hard part done. On the surface, that feels logical. They're experienced, they've done well. I'll just mirror what they're holding. But what you're copying is the result, not the reasoning. You don't know when they entered, why they sized that way, how long they plan to hold, and what their risk tolerance is, or what they'll do if the market moves against them. And without that context, the same portfolio will feel completely different to you. The problem isn't copying. The problem is copying without understanding. Because when pressure hits, you won't know whether to hold, add, reduce, or exit. And that's when panic decisions creep in. That's why this video isn't about giving you a list of coins to blindly follow. It's about helping you understand how to think so you can build something that actually suits you. One more thing before we move on to the rules section. People obsess over entries far more than they should. They wait for the perfect price, they wait for confirmation, and they wait for certainty. And by the time all of that lines up, the opportunity usually has gone. What actually matters more than perfect entries is time horizon. If your time horizon is wrong, no entry will save you. But if your time horizon is correct, small entry mistakes barely matter over the long run. Most people miss moves not because they don't know what to buy, but because they weren't positioned early enough or patiently enough to benefit when it finally happened. All of this leads into a really important part of this video, because once you understand how people sabotage their own portfolios, the next question becomes, how do you protect yourself from doing the same thing? And the answer is rules. Clear rules, boring rules, rules that stop emotion creeping in. So in the next section, I'm going to walk you through exact rules I'd follow before building this portfolio. And this is the part that separates people who survive cycles from people who don't. Everything we've talked about so far leads to this section, because once you understand how people sabotage themselves in crypto, the obvious question becomes, how do you stop yourself doing the same thing? And the answer isn't a better coin. It isn't faster entry, and it isn't more information. Rules are what create distance between you and your emotions. They don't exist to make you money quickly. They exist to stop you losing money unnecessarily. And if you can stay in the game long enough, the money side tends to look after itself. So before I talk about a single coin, this is the framework I'd follow if I was building this portfolio today. The first rule is simple, but most people completely ignore it. Survival comes before returns. That sounds obvious, but almost nobody behaves that way in practice. Most people build portfolios as if the next bull market is guaranteed. They assume that the upside will arrive on schedule, They assume drawdowns will be short, and they assume they'll be emotionally fine holding through the volatility. And then when the market does what markets always do, surprises them, the portfolio falls apart. If you blow up, it doesn't matter how good your thesis was. If you're forced out at the wrong time, it doesn't matter how right you were eventually. You don't get paid for being right. You get paid for staying solvent. Every rule that follows comes back to this idea. Protect your capital first. An opportunity only matters if you're still around to take it. The second rule is one people really struggle with in crypto, and that is that your cash is a position. Doing nothing is a decision, and waiting is not failure. Crypto trains people to feel like they should always be doing something. If price is moving, you feel like you're missing out. If price is flat, you feel like you're wasting time. So people force trades, they force entries, and they force exposure. And that's how risk creeps in unnoticed. Cash gives you options. Cash gives you patience. Cash gives you the ability to act when opportunity appears, not when boredom demands action. People run out of money not because they were wrong, but because they were fully invested at the wrong time. The third rule is where the most emotional damage happens. Position size matters more than your conviction. You can have the best thesis in the world, but if the size is wrong, the trade will fail psychologically. Big size magnifies your emotion. Small pullbacks feel like disasters. Normal volatility feels unbearable, and rational thinking completely disappears. And once emotion takes over, people stop following plans and start reacting. If a position is so large that you need it to work, it's probably already too big. Good positioning sizing allows you to think clearly, and clear thinking is far more valuable than confidence. The next rule is about diversification, and not in the way most people think about it. Diversification isn't about maximizing your returns. It's about protecting you from yourself. When everything depends on one coin, one narrative, or one outcome, pressure builds, and pressure leads to bad decisions. A diversified portfolio spreads emotional load, not just financial risk. It's much easier to sit through volatility when no single position controls your mood. People often say diversification limits the upside. What it really does is increases the chance you actually stay invested long enough to see the upside. The final rule before we build the portfolio is this. You must define your time horizons before you invest. Not during drawdowns, not after price moves, before. If you don't know whether you're investing for months or years, every price move feels confusing. You won't know whether to hold, add, or exit. And that uncertainty leads straight back to emotional decision making. Time horizon creates clarity, and clarity removes your panic. Once you know how long you're willing to sit in a position, short-term noise loses its power over you. These rules are not exciting. They won't get likes. They probably won't trend. But they're the difference between people who survive crypto cycles and people who don't. Now that those rules are in place, we can finally do the fun part, actually building the portfolio. Because once structure is set, decisions become much simpler. So in the next section, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I'd split that £10,000 and why each part of the portfolio exists. Now that the rules are in place, this is where everything starts to get simpler. That's important because most people do this the wrong way round. They start with coins, they start with narratives, and they start with excitement. But if you don't build structure first, the portfolio ends up controlling you instead of the other way round. So when I think about a portfolio, I don't think in terms of individual coins first. I think in terms of layers. Each layer has a job, and each layer exists for a reason. And if you understand why each layer is there, the actual coin selection becomes far less stressful. The mistake most beginners make is treating every pound the same. They put every emotional weight on every position, which means when one thing moves, everything feels like it's on the line. A layered portfolio fixes that, because not every part of your money is meant to do the same job. Some capital is there to protect you. Some capital is there to grow steadily. Some capital is there to take a calculated risk. And some capital is there to give you flexibility. Once you separate those roles, decision-making becomes much easier. This is the framework I'd use to split that £10,000 up. Not because it's perfect, but because it keeps you balanced through the different market conditions. The first layer is the core. This is the foundation of the portfolio. Its job is not to be exciting. Its job is not to moon overnight. Its job is to anchor everything else. This is the part of the portfolio that lets you sleep at night. When the market gets volatile, this is the layer that keeps your overall exposure grounded. If this layer fails, the entire portfolio becomes unstable. The reason people struggle here is because the core holdings feel boring. They don't give you adrenaline. They don't give you big stories to tell. But without a solid core, everything else becomes emotionally exhausting. The second layer is the growth layer. This is where you aim to outperform the market, but without going full casino. These are the assets you believe have strong upside over time, but still sit within a sensible risk profile. This layer carries more volatility than the core, and that's fine. It's meant to move more, but it's sized in a way where drawdowns don't force you into bad decisions. The growth layer is where patience pays off. Not because you trade it constantly, but because you allow time and market cycles to do the work. The third layer is high risk exposure. This is where most people make their biggest mistakes. They either ignore this layer completely or go way too heavy on it. This part of the portfolio exists to give you more explosive upside, smaller allocations, but bigger potential returns. But because the size is controlled, failure here doesn't destroy your portfolio. This layer should never be the emotional center of your portfolio. If this is the part you're constantly watching, something is wrong. The final layer is cash. And I know people hate hearing that, but cash isn't wasted money. Cash is giving you options. Cash allows you to react instead of panic. It gives you the ability to add when fear appears. It stops you being fully committed at exactly the wrong moment. Most people don't lose because they were wrong. They lose because they were fully invested when opportunity actually showed up. The reason this structure works isn't because it's clever. It's because it aligns with how humans actually behave. When the markets drop, the core stabilizes you. When markets grind sideways, the structure stops you overtrading. And when markets run, you already have exposure. You're not constantly reshuffling the entire portfolio. You're adjusting within a framework. And that's the difference between investing and reacting. Now that the portfolio structure is set, the next question becomes, how do you actually put your money to work? Do you go all in? Do you wait? Do you scale? Because this is where a lot of people undo all the good work they've just done. So in the next section, I want to walk you through how I'd actually deploy this money and the mistakes I'd actively try to avoid along the way. Once the portfolio structure is set, this is where people usually undo all the good work. Not because they picked bad assets, not because the structure was wrong, but because they rushed to the deployment. Most people think the hard part is choosing what to buy, and it isn't. The hard part is deciding how and when to put money to work without letting emotion creep back in. The first decision people obsess over is whether to go all in at once or to scale in. And the truth is, there's no universal right answer. What matters is whether your choice matches your temperament. If you go all in and the market pulls back, you need to be emotionally prepared for that. If you scale in too slowly, you need to accept that you might miss some upside. Problems only appear when people choose one method but accept the outcome of the other. This is why I lean towards structured deployment. Not because it guarantees better returns, but because it reduces the chances of panic decisions. And one of the most common mistakes I see is people chasing confirmation. They want price to prove them right before they commit. But by the time everybody feels comfortable, the risk reward has often flipped. So people end up buying strength, then panicking on pullbacks that were completely normal. Or they wait so long for perfection that they never build a meaningful position at all. Perfect entries are massively overrated in my eyes. Consistent positioning is far more important. Where things really go wrong is when people abandon their own plan midway through deployment. They start with structure, they start with patience, then the market moves, and suddenly they're changing their plan on the fly. They add too much too quickly. They move money between layers emotionally. They chase whatever is moving that week. And before they realize it, the portfolio no longer reflects the structure they started with. This is the moment the portfolios quietly break. Not in a dramatic crash, not in one bad decision, but through a series of small emotional adjustments that feel harmless at the time. One of the hardest skills in investing is knowing when not to act. Doing nothing feels uncomfortable. It feels like you're missing out. It feels like you're falling behind. But most of the time, doing nothing is exactly what the portfolios need. If the structure is right and the rules are being followed, constant action is usually a sign of discomfort, not opportunity. So if you take anything from this section, let it be this: structure comes first, discipline comes second, and action only comes after those two are in place. Now that we've covered the structure, the rules, and the deployment, I want to finish this video by zooming out and talking about why doing this alone is so much harder than it needs to be. So now that we've covered the rules, the structure, and the deployment, and the mistakes to avoid, I want to do something important. I want to put all that together into a real, tangible example. Not theory, not hypotheticals. Just a clean, sensible £10,000 portfolio built using everything we've talked about so far. This is not the only way to do it. This is not financial advice. This is simply one example of how structure, risk control, and patience actually looks in practice. The goal of this portfolio isn't to gamble. It's to survive and participate and stay emotionally in control through different market conditions. We start with the core because survival always comes first. In this example, the core makes up 50% of the portfolio, or in this example, £5,000. If this part isn't solid, nothing else matters. The core is split between Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin acts as the monetary anchor. It's the most liquid asset in crypto. It sets the tone for the market and it reduces tail risk. Ethereum adds ecosystem and infrastructure exposure, smart contracts, applications, and network activity. Together, they stabilize the portfolio and stop everything else from feeling stressful. If this part feels boring, that's exactly what it's meant to feel like. Next comes the growth layer. This is where we aim to outperform the market without going full casino. In this example, the growth layer makes up 30% of the portfolio, or £3,000. These are established networks with real narratives, real liquidity, and the potential to outperform over time. They're more volatile than the core, and that's fine. They're supposed to be. But they're sized so that drawdowns don't force bad decisions. This is conviction with restraint. This layer rewards patience, not constant tinkering. Then we have the risk layer. This is where most people either go too hard or avoid it entirely. In this example, risk makes up 15% of the portfolio, or £1,500. These aren't micro-cap meme coins hiding in the trenches. These are large cap, liquid memes that survive cycles far better than most people expect. If they underperform, the portfolio survives. If they outperform, the upside is meaningful. This is risk with a seatbelt on. Finally, we keep 5% or £500 in cash. Cash gives you flexibility. It stops you being fully committed at exactly the wrong time, and it allows you to act during fear instead of panic. Cash doesn't reduce opportunity, it protects it. So when you step back and look at this as a whole, no single coin controls your mood. No single narrative decides your fate. The portfolio is balanced, layered, and designed to survive different market conditions. This isn't about being clever. It's about being consistent. And most importantly, it's about staying in the game long enough for crypto to actually work in your favor. Now, everything you've seen in this video, the rules, the structure, the discipline, is much harder to stick to when you're doing it alone. And that's what I want to finish this video by talking about. So before we wrap this up, I want to zoom out for a moment. Everything we've talked about in this video, the rules, the structure, the discipline, the patience, all of that sounds straightforward on paper. But sticking to it in real time is the hard part. Because when markets get emotional, when price starts moving fast, when social media is shouting different opinions every day, that's when people abandon good plans. Not because the plan was wrong, but because they were trying to execute it on their own. And that's something most people don't talk about enough. Crypto can be a very lonely place. Unless your best mate is into crypto, most of the time you're sat there on your own, making decisions in your head, second guessing yourself, wondering if you're early, late, or just completely wrong. And when you're isolated, emotions get louder. Fear feels bigger. Doubt feels heavier. And that's when people make decisions they later regret. That's exactly why we built the Crypto Wolf Pack. Not as a hype group, not as a signal factory, but as a proper community of people who genuinely love crypto and want to navigate the market together. Inside the Wolfpack, you've got daily group live streams, constant discussion, chart breakdowns, and people talking through the market in real time. You're not trading in silence. You're not guessing on your own. You're part of the pack. If you want to join us, there's a link in the description, or you can head over to cryptowolfpack.co.uk. If you use the promo code LIVE25, you'll get 25% off your first month's subscription, which brings the price down to less than £20 for the month. Look, there's no pressure, but just know it's there if you want to be around people who are on the same journey as you. If you've made it this far, I genuinely appreciate you spending the time with me. Hopefully this video has helped you think more clearly about portfolios, risk, and patience. And if it did, drop me a comment down below about how you're feeling about portfolio structures now. Maybe it's your portfolio. Maybe it's one that you're going to plan. And I'll try and reply to as many of you as I can. Take care, stay disciplined, and I'll see you on the next one. And remember this, the strength of the wolf is in the pack.